She had been invisible for 17 years, moving through hallways like a ghost with a mop bucket. Everyone saw the uniform, the cart, the quiet nod she gave when they passed. No one saw the sharp eyes that noticed everything, the steady hands that had once diffused situations far more dangerous than spilled coffee or broken glass. When the lockdown alarm pierced the morning air and 3 figures in tactical gear stormed through the main entrance, the teachers ran, the students hid, and the security guard reached for his radio. But Maria Santos reached for something else entirely. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of Riverside High School, casting long rectangles of golden light across the polished linoleum floors. Maria Santos pushed her cart down the main hallway with the same measured pace she had maintained for nearly 2 decades. The wheels squeaked softly, a rhythm that had become as familiar to the school as the morning announcements or the bell that marked the end of first period. At 53, Maria moved with an economy of motion that spoke of efficiency rather than urgency, her graying hair pulled back in a practical bun beneath the navy blue cap that bore the school district's logo. The hallways buzzed with the controlled chaos of a Tuesday morning. Students clustered around lockers, their voices creating a steady hum of conversation that mixed complaints about homework with excited chatter about weekend plans. Teachers hurried past carrying coffee cups and stacks of papers, their faces wearing the familiar expression of educators preparing for another day of managing both curriculum and chaos. Maria navigated through it all like water flowing around stones, her presence acknowledged with the occasional polite nod, but largely unremarked upon. She paused at locker 247, where someone had spilled what appeared to be an entire energy drink across the floor during the morning rush. The sticky blue liquid had already begun to attract debris and footprints, creating the kind of mess that would only get worse if left unattended. Maria retrieved a bottle of cleaning solution from her cart and began the methodical process of restoration. As she worked, fragments of conversation drifted around her. 2 sophomore girls stood nearby, deeply engaged in a discussion about their upcoming chemistry test. One of them gestured dramatically with her hands, nearly knocking her textbook to the floor. "I swear, Mrs. Patterson makes these tests impossible on purpose. Like, who actually needs to know the molecular structure of caffeine in real life?" Her friend laughed, adjusting the strap of her backpack. "Maybe if you spent less time drinking caffeine and more time studying its structure, you'd pass the test." They walked away, their voices fading into the general noise of the hallway. Maria finished cleaning the spill and moved on, her cartwheels resuming their familiar squeak. At the far end of the corridor, she could see Mr. Davidson, the assistant principal, standing outside his office talking to a parent. His voice carried that particular tone of patient authority that administrators perfected over years of managing expectations and diffusing conflicts. Near the gymnasium entrance, a group of basketball players had gathered around their coach, listening intently to what appeared to be a strategy session. Coach Reynolds towered over his players, his clipboard held like a battle plan, as he explained some complex play involving screens and picks. The boys nodded with the serious expressions of athletes who understood that their afternoon game would require every advantage they could gain. Maria had seen thousands of these moments during her time at Riverside High. The daily rhythms of education played out in hallways and classrooms, each day bringing new challenges and small victories. She had watched students grow from awkward freshmen into confident seniors, had seen teachers arrive fresh from college and evolve into seasoned educators. The school had become more than her workplace. It was a community where she had found her place, even if that place was often in the background. The maintenance closet on the second floor served as her unofficial headquarters, a small space that she had organized with military precision. Cleaning supplies lined the shelves in neat rows, each bottle and tool positioned exactly where it needed to be. A small radio played softly in the corner, tuned to a Spanish-language station that connected her to the culture and music of her childhood. On the back of the door, she had taped a schedule that tracked her daily rounds through the building, a system that ensured every corner of the school received attention. As she restocked her cart for the morning rounds, Maria reflected on the strange invisibility that came with her position. Students and staff moved around her as if she were part of the building's infrastructure, as essential and unremarkable as the lights or the heating system. This invisibility had its advantages. She heard conversations that others missed, noticed details that escaped busier eyes, developed an understanding of the school's social ecosystem that ran deeper than most realized. She knew which teachers struggled with classroom management and which ones had mastered the delicate balance of authority and approachability. She could predict which students were likely to cause problems and which ones were simply misunderstood. She had observed the subtle hierarchies that existed among both faculty and students, the unspoken alliances and rivalries that shaped daily interactions. The second-floor hallway stretched before her like a familiar road. Room 201 belonged to Mrs. Chen, a mathematics teacher who had arrived at Riverside 3 years earlier, with innovative ideas about making algebra accessible to struggling students. Her classroom walls were covered with colorful posters that transformed abstract concepts into visual representations. Maria had often paused outside the door during her cleaning rounds, listening to Mrs. Chen's patient explanations and her students' gradual understanding. Next door, Mr. Thompson taught world history with the passionate intensity of someone who genuinely believed that understanding the past was essential for navigating the present. His classroom resembled a museum, with artifacts and replicas that brought ancient civilizations to life. Students who seemed bored in other classes often found themselves engaged by his dramatic reenactments of historical events. Room 203 housed the school's computer lab, where Ms. Rodriguez taught everything from basic typing skills to advanced programming. The room hummed with the quiet efficiency of 24 computers, their screens casting blue light across the faces of students who represented the school's most diverse mix of interests and abilities. Some were destined for careers in technology, while others simply needed to fulfill graduation requirements. Ms. Rodriguez treated all of them with the same patient encouragement. Maria's cartwheels caught on a loose piece of tape as she passed the main office, causing her to pause and readjust her supplies. Through the glass windows, she could see the school's administrative heart in full operation. Secretary Mrs. Palmer sat behind the main desk, managing the constant stream of phone calls, visitor check-ins, and student requests that defined her day. Her desk was organized chaos, with neat stacks of papers, a coffee mug that read "World's Most Patient Person," and a small plant that somehow thrived despite the artificial lighting. Principal Dr. Williams occupied the corner office, his door usually open as a signal that he was available for the conversations and crises that inevitably arose. At 45, he had been leading Riverside High for 6 years, long enough to understand its culture, but not so long that he had become complacent about its challenges. He was the kind of administrator who remembered students' names and made an effort to attend their games and performances. The guidance counselor, Mrs. Foster, had claimed a smaller office near the main entrance, where she helped students navigate everything from course selection to college applications. Her walls were covered with university pennants and motivational posters, creating an environment that encouraged students to think beyond their current circumstances. She was known for her ability to see potential in students who didn't see it in themselves. As Maria continued her rounds, she passed groups of students engaged in the social negotiations that defined high school life. Near the library entrance, a cluster of seniors discussed their college applications with the mixture of excitement and anxiety that came with approaching graduation. Their conversation touched on SAT scores, application essays, and the terrifying freedom of choosing their own futures. State University has a really good engineering program, one boy was saying, his voice carrying the confidence of someone who had researched his options thoroughly. Plus, my brother went there, so I know what to expect. His friend, a girl with artistic aspirations, shook her head. I need to get somewhere with a strong art department. Even if it means going further from home, sometimes you have to take risks to find what you're meant to do. Their conversation represented the eternal tension between safety and ambition that Maria had observed in countless graduating classes. Some students chose the familiar path, while others embraced uncertainty in pursuit of their dreams. Both approaches had their merits, and she had seen success and failure follow both strategies. The library itself served as a refuge for students who needed quiet space to study, or simply escape the social pressures of hallway interactions. Mrs. Kim, the librarian, had transformed the space from a traditional repository of books into a modern learning center that accommodated different learning styles and technological needs. Students could find everything from classic literature to digital research databases, all overseen by a woman who understood that libraries were about more than just books. In one corner, a group of students worked on a group project, their heads bent over laptops and notebooks as they synthesized research from multiple sources. At a nearby table, a solitary junior read quietly, completely absorbed in a novel that had transported her far from the everyday concerns of teenage life. Near the circulation desk, two freshmen struggled with a particularly challenging assignment, whispering questions to each other as they tried to understand concepts that seemed designed to confuse them. Maria appreciated the library's atmosphere of purposeful activity. It reminded her of her own student days, when she had spent hours in similar spaces, working toward goals that seemed both essential and impossibly distant. Education had been her pathway to opportunities that her parents' generation could barely imagine, and she retained a deep respect for the transformative power of learning. The cafeteria presented a different kind of energy entirely. Even during non-meal times, it served as an informal gathering space where students could socialize without the constraints of classroom behavior. The large room echoed with conversations in multiple languages, reflecting the diverse backgrounds of Riverside High's student body. Round tables were arranged to encourage interaction, though students often rearranged them according to their own social preferences. Mrs. Jackson, the cafeteria manager, oversaw the complex logistics of feeding over 800 students each day. Her operation required the coordination of multiple staff members, careful attention to dietary restrictions and preferences, and the kind of efficiency that could prevent the chaos that hunger often created among teenagers. She had been at Riverside for 12 years, long enough to remember many current seniors as nervous sixth-graders who weren't sure how to navigate the lunch line. The kitchen staff worked with practiced coordination, preparing meals that had to balance nutritional requirements with the reality of teenage taste preferences. They knew which foods would disappear quickly and which would require creative marketing to avoid waste. Their conversations during quiet moments revealed the same kind of professional pride that Maria recognized in her own work, the satisfaction that came from performing essential tasks that others might overlook. As Maria made her way toward the science wing, she encountered Mr. Peterson, one of the school's veteran teachers, hurrying toward his classroom with an armload of laboratory equipment. At 62, he had been teaching chemistry for over 3 decades, long enough to have instructed the parents of some of his current students. His classroom was a controlled chaos of beakers, charts, and safety equipment that spoke to both his expertise and his commitment to hands-on learning. "Morning, Maria," he said with the distracted courtesy of someone whose mind was already focused on the day's lessons. "Hope you're having a good week." She nodded and smiled, appreciating the acknowledgement even as she recognized its routine nature. Mr. Peterson was one of the teachers who made an effort to treat all staff members with respect, but his interactions remained surface level. This was typical of her experience at Riverside High. She was valued for her work, but not necessarily seen as a person with her own expertise and insights. The science wing itself reflected the school's commitment to providing students with access to modern educational facilities. Each classroom was equipped with the tools and technology necessary for hands-on exploration of scientific concepts. Biology students could examine specimens under high-powered microscopes, while physics students could conduct experiments that demonstrated fundamental principles in tangible ways. Dr. Martinez, the biology teacher, had covered her classroom walls with charts showing everything from cell structures to evolutionary timelines. Her students were currently engaged in a unit on genetics that required them to map family traits and understand the mathematical principles underlying heredity. The complexity of the subject matter challenged even the most academically gifted students, but Dr. Martinez had developed innovative ways to make abstract concepts accessible. The physics classroom next door presented a different kind of complexity. Mr. Anderson had arranged his space to accommodate experiments that required careful measurement and precise calculations. Students worked in pairs to build simple machines, measure forces, and explore the principles that governed motion and energy. The room buzzed with the kind of focused activity that occurred when theoretical knowledge met practical application. Maria's route took her past the music wing, where different kinds of learning were taking place. The band room resonated with the sounds of students practicing scales and working through challenging pieces. Mr. Davis, the band director, moved among the musicians with the patience of someone who understood that excellence required both individual discipline and collective cooperation. His students represented a wide range of skill levels, from beginners who were still learning to read music to advanced players who were preparing for state competitions. The choir room next door offered a different musical experience. Mrs. Sullivan worked with voices rather than instruments, helping students discover the power and beauty of their own natural abilities. Her classes included students who had been singing since childhood, as well as those who were exploring music for the first time. The democracy of vocal music meant that anyone could participate, regardless of their family's ability to purchase instruments or private lessons. The art wing provided yet another kind of creative outlet. Ms. Walker had transformed 3 connected classrooms into studios that accommodated everything from traditional painting and drawing to digital design and sculpture. Her students' work covered the walls, creating an environment that celebrated both technical skill and creative expression. Some pieces showed the careful attention to detail that came from hours of practice, while others captured the bold experimentation that marked artistic growth. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. As Maria continued her morning rounds, she reflected on the complex ecosystem that made Riverside High function. Each classroom represented not just a subject area but a community of learners engaged in the challenging work of developing their abilities and understanding their place in the world. The teachers served as guides and mentors, but the real learning happened through the interactions between students and ideas, between individual effort and collaborative discovery. The gymnasium complex occupied a significant portion of the school's first floor, reflecting the community's commitment to athletic programs as well as general physical education. Coach Reynolds supervised the boys' basketball team, while Coach Martinez worked with the girls' soccer team. Both coaches understood that their roles extended beyond teaching sports skills, to include character development and life lessons about teamwork, perseverance, and handling both success and disappointment. The weight room adjacent to the gymnasium served students who were training for various sports, as well as those who simply wanted to maintain their physical fitness. The equipment was well maintained and arranged to accommodate different strength training approaches. Students worked out under the supervision of coaches who emphasized proper technique and safety, understanding that injuries could derail both individual progress and team success. Maria's responsibilities extended to all areas of the building, including spaces that students rarely considered. The mechanical rooms housed the equipment that controlled heating, cooling, and ventilation, ensuring that learning could take place in comfortable environments regardless of weather conditions. The electrical systems that powered everything from classroom lights to computer labs required regular maintenance and monitoring. The building's security systems had evolved over the years, reflecting both technological advances and changing concerns about school safety. Cameras monitored main entrances and hallways, while controlled access systems regulated who could enter the building during school hours. These measures struck a balance between providing protection and maintaining the open, welcoming atmosphere that supported effective education. Maria understood these systems better than most people realized. Her daily routines took her throughout the building at different times, giving her a comprehensive understanding of how various spaces were used and when they were most vulnerable. She had noticed patterns in both normal activities and unusual occurrences, developing an intuitive sense of when something was out of place. The school's emergency procedures were practiced regularly, with monthly drills that prepared students and staff for various scenarios. Fire drills were routine and familiar, conducted with the efficient boredom of people who had performed the same actions many times. Lockdown drills carried more tension, reflecting awareness of threats that previous generations of students and teachers had not needed to consider. During these drills, Maria had observed how different people responded to simulated emergencies. Some teachers managed their students with calm authority, while others struggled to maintain control when normal routines were disrupted. Students' reactions ranged from treating the drills as welcome breaks from classwork to expressing genuine anxiety about the scenarios being practiced. The administrative team took these preparations seriously, understanding that their leadership during actual emergencies would determine how effectively the school community could respond to threats. They had developed comprehensive plans that addressed various scenarios, but they also recognized that real emergencies often unfolded in ways that differed from practiced procedures. As Maria finished restocking the supply closets on the second floor, she could hear the familiar sounds of a school day gaining momentum. Teachers were beginning their first period classes, their voices carrying through closed doors as they welcomed students and introduced the day's lessons. Hallways that had been busy with transitioning students were now mostly empty, creating the kind of quiet that allowed for focused learning. This transition marked one of Maria's favorite times of the school day. The morning rush had settled into productive routines, but the energy of new possibilities still filled the air. Students were encountering ideas that might change their understanding of the world, while teachers were sharing knowledge and enthusiasm that could inspire lifelong learning. In room 215, Mrs. Patterson was beginning her chemistry class with a demonstration that would illustrate the principles of chemical reactions. Her students leaned forward with interest as she carefully measured reactants and explained the theoretical framework that would help them understand what they were about to observe. The explosion of color and gas that followed would create a memory that connected abstract concepts to dramatic visual experience. Down the hall, Mr. Wilson was guiding his English class through a discussion of character motivation in the novel they were reading together. His questions pushed students to think beyond surface-level plot points to consider the psychological and social factors that drove human behavior. These conversations developed critical thinking skills that extended far beyond literature into every area of their lives. The mathematics wing presented its own challenges and rewards. Miss Thompson was working with students who found algebra intimidating, breaking down complex problems into manageable steps that built confidence along with understanding. Her patience and encouragement helped students realize that mathematical thinking was not a mysterious talent but a learnable skill that became more accessible with practice. Maria's work brought her into contact with the evidence of all this learning. She cleaned whiteboards covered with equations and diagrams, emptied trash cans filled with draft essays and practice problems, and organized classrooms that showed the creative chaos of minds at work. Each piece of discarded paper represented an attempt to understand something new, a small step in the lifelong process of education. The special education wing required particular attention to creating environments that supported students with diverse learning needs. Mrs. Garcia and her team of specialists worked with students who faced various challenges, adapting teaching methods and materials to ensure that everyone had access to meaningful education. Their classrooms were organized to minimize distractions while providing the tools and support that enabled learning for students with different abilities. These educators understood that success took many forms, and that traditional measurements of achievement did not capture the full range of human potential. They celebrated small victories and persistent effort, recognizing that progress often happened in ways that were invisible to casual observers. Their work required both professional expertise and deep empathy, qualities that Maria observed and admired during her daily interactions with their students. The foreign language classrooms presented their own unique environments. Señora Valdez immersed her Spanish students in a linguistic world that transported them beyond the familiar boundaries of English. Her walls were covered with maps, cultural artifacts, and student projects that connected language learning to broader understanding of different societies and perspectives. Madame Dubois approached French instruction with similar cultural richness, helping students understand that learning a language meant entering into new ways of thinking and expressing ideas. Her classes included cooking projects, cultural celebrations, and correspondence with students in France, creating connections that extended far beyond vocabulary and grammar. The Business and Technology Education Wing prepared students for careers in a rapidly changing economy. Mr. Adams taught courses in computer programming, web design, and digital media production, skills that were increasingly relevant across all industries. His students learned not just technical skills, but also the problem-solving approaches and creative thinking that would serve them in any field they chose to enter. Mrs. Foster's business classes covered everything from basic financial literacy to entrepreneurship, giving students practical knowledge they would need as adults regardless of their career paths. Her simulations of business operations allowed students to experience the challenges and rewards of economic decision-making in controlled environments where mistakes became learning opportunities rather than serious consequences. As the morning progressed, Maria found herself thinking about the layers of complexity that existed within what many people saw as a simple educational institution. Riverside High School was simultaneously a workplace for dozens of adults, a learning environment for hundreds of teenagers, and a community center that brought together families from diverse backgrounds and circumstances. The parent volunteers who helped in the library, chaperoned field trips, and supported various school activities added another dimension to this community. They brought their own skills and perspectives, while also learning about the challenges and opportunities their children faced. The connections formed through these interactions often extended beyond school boundaries to create networks of support and friendship. The school board members and district administrators who made policy decisions affecting Riverside High rarely spent extended time in the building, but their choices shaped everything from curriculum standards to resource allocation. Maria had observed how these decisions played out in practical terms, seeing which programs flourished with adequate support and which struggled to meet their goals with limited resources. The maintenance and support staff who worked alongside Maria understood the building's infrastructure in ways that enabled the educational mission to proceed smoothly. The custodial crew, food service workers, and groundskeeping team all contributed essential services that created the environment where learning could take place. Their work was often invisible to the school community, but its absence would quickly become apparent. As she prepared for her next round of classroom cleaning, Maria reflected on her unique position within this complex community. Her work required her to be present in all areas of the building at different times of day, giving her a perspective that few others shared. She had developed relationships with students and staff that were characterized by mutual respect, even if they remained somewhat formal. Some students had grown comfortable enough with her presence to engage in brief conversations when they encountered her in hallways or classrooms. These interactions revealed their concerns about grades, friendships, family situations, and future plans. Maria listened with genuine interest, offering encouragement when appropriate while respecting the boundaries of her role. The teachers and administrators who worked with her daily had come to rely on her efficiency and discretion. They knew she would notice and address problems before they became serious issues, whether those involved maintenance concerns or student behavior. Her consistent presence provided a kind of stability that supported the more dramatic and visible work of education. The building itself had become as familiar to Maria as her own home. She knew which doors tended to stick, which faucets dripped despite repeated repairs, and which areas required extra attention during different seasons. Her understanding of the physical plant complemented the work of the official maintenance staff, who appreciated her ability to identify and report problems before they became emergencies. This intimate knowledge of Riverside High School's layout and operations had been acquired gradually over 17 years of careful observation and dedicated service. What others might see as routine janitorial work, Maria understood as a form of stewardship that protected and preserved an institution that served hundreds of families and community members. The morning announcements crackled through the intercom system, Principal Dr. Williams' voice carrying the mixture of authority and warmth that characterized his communication style. He reminded students about upcoming events, recognized achievements by various teams and clubs, and addressed practical matters that affected daily operations. His announcements served as a daily thread that connected the diverse activities and interests that coexisted within the school. Maria paused in her work to listen, as she did every morning. These announcements often contained information that affected her work schedule or alerted her to special events that might require additional preparation. She had learned to anticipate the needs created by assemblies, testing periods, and other disruptions to normal routines. As she resumed cleaning, Maria's thoughts turned to the students she had watched grow and change during her years at Riverside High. Some had arrived as insecure freshmen and gradually developed the confidence and skills that would serve them well beyond graduation. Others had struggled with various challenges, but had found support from teachers, counselors, and peers that helped them overcome obstacles and discover their potential. She remembered students who had gone on to successful careers in fields ranging from medicine to education to business, many of whom had credited their high school experiences with providing crucial foundation for their later achievements. She also remembered students who had faced serious difficulties during their time at Riverside, but had found ways to redirect their lives toward more positive outcomes. The failures were harder to forget, but equally important to acknowledge. Some students had not been able to take advantage of the opportunities available to them, whether due to personal circumstances, family situations, or individual challenges that proved too difficult to overcome. These cases reminded everyone involved in education that their work was important, but not always sufficient to address all the factors that influenced young people's lives. The diversity of backgrounds and experiences represented within Riverside High School's student body created both opportunities and challenges for the educational community. Students brought different cultural perspectives, economic circumstances, and family expectations that enriched classroom discussions while also requiring teachers to adapt their approaches to meet varied needs. Maria appreciated this diversity from her unique perspective as someone who moved through all areas of the school and observed interactions across different groups. She had noticed how students from different backgrounds found ways to connect through shared interests in sports, music, academic subjects, and other activities that transcended their differences. The English as a Second Language program served students whose families had recently immigrated to the United States, providing crucial support as they adapted to new educational expectations while maintaining connections to their cultural heritage. These students often demonstrated remarkable resilience and determination as they navigated the challenges of learning academic content in a language they were still mastering. The free and reduced lunch program ensured that students from low-income families had access to nutritious meals that supported their ability to focus on learning rather than hunger. The discreet implementation of this program protected students' dignity while addressing a basic need that could otherwise create barriers to educational success. The various clubs and extracurricular activities provided outlets for interests and talents that extended beyond traditional academic subjects. The drama club allowed students to explore creative expression and performance skills, while the debate team developed critical thinking and public speaking abilities. Service clubs connected students to community needs and opportunities for civic engagement. The academic honor societies recognized students who had demonstrated excellence in various subject areas, providing motivation for high achievement, while also creating peer networks that supported continued learning. These organizations often extended their activities beyond the school to include community service and leadership development opportunities. The sports programs attracted students with different kinds of talents and interests, teaching lessons about teamwork, perseverance, and healthy competition that would serve them well in many areas of life. The coaches who led these programs understood their roles as mentors and character developers, as well as instructors in athletic skills. As Maria completed her morning rounds and prepared for the lunch period rush, she reflected on the intricate web of relationships and activities that made Riverside High School more than just a building where classes were held. It was a community where young people developed not only academic knowledge but also social skills, personal values, and visions for their futures. The bell rang to signal the end of second period, and hallways immediately filled with students transitioning between classes. Maria positioned herself and her cart out of the main traffic flow, watching the familiar choreography of movement as hundreds of teenagers navigated their way to their next destinations. Their conversations created a steady hum of voices that spoke of friendships, concerns, excitement, and the countless small dramas that comprised their daily experience. In a few minutes, this energy would settle again as students took their seats and teachers began new lessons. The cycle of learning and growth would continue, supported by the complex infrastructure of people and systems that made education possible. Maria would continue her quiet work of maintaining the environment where all of this could happen, invisible to most but essential to all. The lunch period transformed Riverside High into a different creature entirely. Maria wheeled her cart through corridors that moments before had been filled with the purposeful movement of students heading to classes. Now these same hallways buzzed with the relaxed energy of social interaction, as groups gathered around lockers to continue conversations interrupted by morning lessons. The cafeteria drew the largest crowds, but pockets of students claimed spaces throughout the building for their informal gatherings. Maria had learned to navigate lunch period with particular care. Students were more relaxed, more likely to spill drinks or drop food, and less aware of their surroundings as they focused on friends and conversations. The increased foot traffic meant more wear on floors and more debris in corners. It also meant witnessing the complex social dynamics that played out when academic structure loosened its grip on teenage behavior. Near the main entrance, a group of seniors had established their informal headquarters on the steps leading to the second floor. These were students who had earned certain privileges through their status as upperclassmen, including more freedom during lunch periods in study halls. Their conversations ranged from college applications to weekend plans, with the easy confidence of young people who had figured out how to navigate the school's social landscape. Sarah Chen, the student body president, sat at the center of this group, her presence commanding attention without effort. She had the kind of natural leadership that came from genuine interest in others rather than personal ambition. Her questions about her classmates' activities showed real curiosity, and her responses demonstrated the kind of thoughtful engagement that had earned her widespread respect among both students and faculty. "Have you heard back from Northwestern yet?" she asked James Rodriguez, a quiet boy whose academic achievements had recently earned him recognition at a district competition. James shifted uncomfortably, clearly not used to being the center of attention, even within this friendly group. "Not yet," he replied, his voice carrying the mixture of hope and anxiety that characterized senior year for college-bound students. "The waiting is honestly worse than the application process. At least when I was working on essays, I felt like I was doing something productive." Maria paused to clean a water fountain nearby, her presence unnoticed by the students but her ears attuned to their conversation. She'd observed James throughout his 4 years at Riverside High, watching him transform from a painfully shy freshman into a young man whose quiet intelligence had begun to attract the recognition it deserved. His participation in academic competitions had gradually built his confidence, though he still seemed surprised when others acknowledged his achievements. "The uncertainty is the hardest part," agreed Lisa Park, another member of the group who had been accepted early to her first-choice school. "Even when you know you've done everything you can, you still wonder if it's enough. At least once you know, you can start planning for whatever comes next." Their conversation reflected the universal experience of students standing at the threshold between adolescence and adulthood, facing decisions that would shape their immediate futures, while still trying to understand who they were becoming. Maria had witnessed hundreds of these conversations over the years, each group of seniors grappling with similar questions while believing their situation was unique. The athletic students had claimed their own territory near the gymnasium entrance, where conversation flowed easily between upcoming games, training schedules, and the particular challenges of balancing sports with academic requirements. Coach Reynolds moved among them with the casual authority of someone who understood that his influence extended far beyond teaching basketball strategy. Marcus Williams, the team captain, was discussing strategy for their upcoming game against their crosstown rivals. His natural leadership showed in the way he included younger players in the conversation, making sure everyone understood their role in the team's success. Basketball had taught him lessons about responsibility and teamwork that would serve him well beyond high school, though he was still discovering how those skills might apply to other areas of his life. "Defense is going to win this game," he was saying, his voice carrying the conviction of someone who had learned to trust in preparation and teamwork. "They have some talented shooters, but if we can control the tempo and force them into difficult shots, we can create opportunities for ourselves." The younger players listened intently, their respect for Marcus evident in their attention to his words. Maria had observed similar mentoring relationships across different groups within the school, as older students naturally assumed responsibility for guiding their younger peers. These informal leadership opportunities often proved as valuable as any formal education in preparing young people for adult responsibilities. The art students had gathered in the hallway outside the music wing, their conversations animated by discussions of upcoming performances and creative projects. Their enthusiasm for their work was infectious, drawing interested listeners from other groups who might not consider themselves particularly artistic, but were curious about the creative process. Jennifer Walsh, a talented vocalist who had been accepted to a prestigious music program, was describing her preparation for an upcoming audition. Her dedication to her craft was evident in the technical details she shared about breath control and interpretation, but what struck Maria most was the young woman's genuine love for music that transcended any ambition for professional success. "It's not just about hitting the right notes," Jennifer was explaining to a friend who had asked about her practice routine. "You have to understand what the composer was trying to express and find a way to make that emotion genuine in your own voice. Sometimes I'll spend hours on a single phrase, not because I can't sing it correctly, but because I want to feel what it means." This kind of artistic commitment impressed Maria, who had observed many students discover passions that would influence their entire lives during their time at Riverside High. The school's music and arts programs provided opportunities for creative expression that some students might never have encountered otherwise, opening doors to possibilities they had not previously imagined. The academic clubs had established their own gathering spaces, often in classrooms where their faculty sponsors maintained open doors during lunch periods. The debate team used this time for informal practice sessions, honing arguments they would present in upcoming competitions. Their conversations demonstrated the critical thinking skills that would serve them well in whatever careers they eventually chose. David Kim, the debate team captain, was leading a discussion about a current events topic that would be featured in their next tournament. His ability to see multiple perspectives on complex issues impressed both his teammates and the faculty members who supervised their activities. The skills he was developing in research, analysis, and persuasive communication would transfer to many different professional contexts. "The key is understanding the strongest version of the opposing argument," he was explaining to newer team members. You can't effectively counter a position you haven't fully understood. Sometimes that means arguing for something you personally disagree with, but the exercise teaches you to separate your emotional response from logical analysis. The science-focused students often spent lunch periods in the laboratories, taking advantage of equipment and space to work on projects that extended beyond class requirements. Their conversations mixed technical terminology with the excitement of discovery, as they explored questions that had captured their curiosity. Amanda Foster, a student whose independent research on water quality had attracted attention from local environmental organizations, was explaining her methodology to classmates who were developing their own projects. Her work demonstrated the kind of scientific thinking that could lead to meaningful contributions to community knowledge, even at the high school level. The data collection has to be systematic and unbiased, she was saying, her words reflecting genuine understanding of scientific principles rather than mere memorization. It's easy to see patterns that aren't really there if you're not careful about controlling variables and documenting everything properly. Maria appreciated these students' dedication to learning that extended beyond grade requirements. Their curiosity and willingness to invest time in understanding complex concepts represented the best outcomes of effective education. She had seen many such students go on to careers where their analytical skills and persistence made significant differences in their chosen fields. The special education students participated in the social aspects of lunch period according to their individual needs and abilities. Some joined mainstream groups where they were welcomed and supported by classmates who had learned to appreciate different kinds of contributions. Others preferred smaller gatherings that provided more manageable social environments. Mrs. Garcia, the special education coordinator, moved among these various groups with the practiced eye of someone who understood how to facilitate positive interactions while remaining alert to potential problems. Her presence provided reassurance to students who might struggle with the unstructured nature of lunch period social dynamics. Maria had observed Mrs. Garcia's work over many years and deeply respected her ability to help students with diverse needs find their place within the larger school community. The inclusion of special education students in mainstream activities required careful planning and ongoing support, but the benefits extended to all students who learned to value different kinds of abilities and perspectives. The English language learner students faced particular challenges during social periods, when rapid conversation and cultural references could make participation difficult, even for those who were succeeding academically. Some had formed their own support groups, where they could use their native languages while practicing English in a comfortable environment. Senora Valdez often spent part of her lunch period with these students, providing informal language practice opportunities that supplemented their formal ESL instruction. Her bilingual abilities and cultural understanding helped bridge the gap between their home experiences and school expectations. Carlos Mendoza, a sophomore whose family had moved to the area 2 years earlier, was explaining to classmates how different American high school was from his previous school in El Salvador. His perspective on educational differences provided insights that helped both students and teachers understand how cultural assumptions shaped learning experiences. In my old school, students didn't move between classrooms so much, he was saying, his English now fluent, though still marked by his native accent. The teachers came to us. Here, everyone has their own schedule and chooses different classes. It gives more freedom, but it was confusing at first. The international perspectives these students brought enriched classroom discussions and helped their American-born classmates develop broader worldviews. Maria had noticed how the presence of students from different countries had gradually made the entire school community more aware of global connections and cultural diversity. The lunch period also revealed the economic diversity within Riverside High's student body. Some students purchased meals from the cafeteria, while others brought elaborate lunches prepared at home. The free and reduced lunch program served students whose families faced financial challenges, though the administration worked carefully to ensure these differences remained as discreet as possible. Maria had observed how sensitive teachers and staff members helped minimize the social implications of economic differences, while ensuring all students had access to adequate nutrition. The school's approach recognized that hunger could significantly impact academic performance and social participation. Some students worked part-time jobs that influenced their school experience in various ways. These students often displayed a maturity and work ethic that impressed their teachers, though the demands of employment sometimes created stress when combined with academic requirements. Ashley Brooks, a junior who worked 20 hours per week at a local retail store, was discussing with friends how to balance her work schedule with upcoming midterm exams. Her situation was not uncommon among Riverside High students, many of whom contributed to family finances or saved money for college expenses. "I like having my own money," she was explaining, "but sometimes I wonder if I'm missing out on other things. When I see people talking about clubs they joined or events they attended, I realize I haven't had time to explore those opportunities." Her dilemma reflected broader questions about how young people should spend their time and what experiences would best prepare them for adult responsibilities. Maria had observed students make different choices about this balance, with varying outcomes that depended on individual circumstances and goals. The faculty members who remained on campus during lunch period used the time for various professional activities. Some ate together in the teacher's lounge, using the social time to discuss classroom challenges and share effective strategies. Others remained in their classrooms, preparing materials for afternoon lessons or meeting with students who needed extra help. Mr. Peterson, the veteran chemistry teacher, often spent lunch periods working with students who were struggling with particularly challenging concepts. His patient explanations and willingness to provide individual attention had helped many students overcome initial difficulties and develop confidence in scientific thinking. "Chemistry makes more sense when you can see the patterns," he was telling a frustrated sophomore who had been struggling with equation balancing. "Don't try to memorize every possible combination. Learn the principles, and then apply them systematically to new problems." His teaching philosophy emphasized understanding over memorization, an approach that served students well beyond his particular subject area. Maria had noticed how students who learned to think systematically in one class often applied those skills to challenges in other areas of their academic and personal lives. Mrs. Chen, the mathematics teacher, used her lunch period to create manipulative materials that would help visual learners understand abstract concepts. Her classroom innovation demonstrated the kind of dedication that went far beyond basic job requirements, as she continuously sought new ways to make challenging material accessible to students with different learning styles. The guidance counselors remained available during lunch periods to meet with students who needed to discuss academic planning, personal challenges, or college preparation. Mrs. Foster had become particularly skilled at helping students navigate the complex emotions that accompanied major life transitions. A senior named Robert Taylor was meeting with her to discuss his uncertainty about college choices. Despite strong academic performance, he was paralyzed by the fear of making the wrong decision about his future. His conversation with Mrs. Foster reflected the pressure many students felt to make perfect choices at an age when their understanding of themselves and their options was still developing. "Every choice feels so permanent," he was saying, his voice carrying the weight of 18-year-old anxiety about lifelong consequences. "What if I choose the wrong school, or the wrong major, or the wrong career path? How do I know what I'll want to do for the rest of my life when I'm not even sure who I am yet?" Mrs. Foster's response reflected years of experience helping young people understand that life rarely followed perfectly planned trajectories. Her counseling helped students develop decision-making skills and confidence in their ability to adapt to changing circumstances. The administrative staff used lunch periods to handle the inevitable crises and scheduling challenges that arose daily in a school serving over 800 students. Principal drive. Williams often spent this time meeting with parents, resolving conflicts, or addressing policy questions that required his attention. Assistant Principal Mr. Davidson managed the more routine disciplinary issues that emerged from the complex social dynamics of adolescent life. His approach emphasized restorative justice principles that helped students understand the impact of their choices while providing opportunities for growth and learning from mistakes. Maria had observed both administrators in action during various situations and respected their commitment to creating an environment where all students could succeed. Their leadership styles complemented each other, with Dr. Williams providing vision and inspiration while Mr. Davidson handled day-to-day operations with fairness and consistency. The support staff who worked alongside Maria had their own perspectives on the school's daily operations. The cafeteria workers understood student preferences and dietary needs in ways that informed both menu planning and informal nutritional education. The office staff managed communications with families and coordinated the complex logistics that kept educational programs running smoothly. Mrs. Palmer, the main office secretary, served as an unofficial information center for students, parents, and staff members who needed assistance navigating school procedures. Her institutional knowledge and problem-solving abilities made her an invaluable resource for anyone who encountered bureaucratic challenges. The technology support staff worked behind the scenes to maintain the computer systems and equipment that had become essential to modern education. Their expertise ensured that teachers could integrate digital tools into their instruction, while students developed the technological literacy they would need in college and careers. As Maria moved through the building during this busy lunch period, she reflected on how the informal social dynamics revealed aspects of the school community that were less visible during structured class time. Students' true interests and personalities emerged more clearly when they had freedom to choose their activities and companions. The friendship groups that formed during lunch periods often provided crucial emotional support for young people navigating the challenges of adolescence. These relationships could influence academic motivation, social development, and long-term life choices in ways that formal education alone could not address. Maria had noticed how students from different backgrounds and with different interests often found common ground through shared activities or mutual respect for each other's achievements. The school's diversity created opportunities for cross-cultural learning that prepared students for an increasingly interconnected world. The faculty supervision during lunch periods required a delicate balance between maintaining order and allowing students the freedom they needed for genuine social interaction. Teachers who were skilled at this balance created environments where positive relationships could flourish, while problematic behaviors were addressed before they escalated. The school's physical spaces were designed to accommodate the different ways students preferred to spend their free time. Quiet areas provided space for studying or intimate conversations, while larger spaces allowed for group activities and more energetic interactions. The outdoor courtyards offered fresh air and natural light that many students craved after spending morning hours in classrooms. Weather conditions significantly influenced how lunch periods unfolded, with rainy days concentrating all activities indoors and beautiful days drawing students outside. The maintenance staff had learned to anticipate these patterns and adjust their cleaning schedules accordingly. Maria's work during lunch periods required particular attention to safety concerns that arose when large numbers of students gathered in informal settings. Spills became slip hazards more quickly, and crowded areas required more frequent attention to prevent accidents. The student leadership opportunities that emerged during lunch periods often proved as valuable as formal classroom instruction. Students who organized impromptu study groups, mediated conflicts between friends, or included isolated classmates in their activities were developing skills that would serve them well throughout their lives. The academic support that occurred informally during lunch periods supplemented the formal tutoring programs the school provided. Students who excelled in particular subjects often helped classmates who were struggling, creating peer learning networks that benefited everyone involved. The creative expression that happened during lunch periods extended beyond the formal arts programs. Students wrote poetry, composed music, sketched portraits, and engaged in other artistic activities that reflected their personal interests and developing talents. The athletic activities that continued during lunch periods helped students maintain physical fitness while building friendships across different team sports. The informal games that developed often included students who did not participate in formal athletic programs but enjoyed recreational competition. The cultural exchanges that occurred naturally during lunch periods helped students learn about traditions, foods, languages, and perspectives that differed from their own family backgrounds. These interactions promoted understanding and tolerance that contributed to the school's positive climate. The academic discussions that arose spontaneously during lunch periods often reflected genuine curiosity about subjects that had captured students' interest during morning classes. These conversations demonstrated how effective teaching could inspire learning that extended beyond formal assignments and test requirements. The college and career planning that happened informally among students provided peer perspectives that complemented the formal guidance services the school offered. Students shared information about application processes, financial aid opportunities, and program requirements in ways that helped their classmates make informed decisions. The community service planning that occurred during lunch periods reflected students' growing awareness of social issues and their desire to contribute positively to society. These activities demonstrated how education could inspire civic engagement that would continue throughout their adult lives. As the lunch period drew to a close and students began preparing for afternoon classes, Maria observed the subtle transitions that marked the return to formal academic structure. Conversations shifted from social topics to homework assignments and upcoming tests. Groups disbanded as students headed toward their lockers to gather materials for their next classes. The energy that had characterized the informal social time gradually gave way to the more focused atmosphere that supported classroom learning. Teachers appeared in hallways to supervise the transition and ensure students arrived at their destinations on time and ready to engage with afternoon lessons. Maria positioned her cart in preparation for the post-lunch cleaning that would restore the building to its morning condition. The next few hours would bring different challenges and opportunities as the school community continued its daily work of education and growth. The afternoon sun cast long shadows through the tall windows as Maria finished sanitizing the cafeteria tables. Students had returned to their classes, leaving behind the usual debris of lunch period, crumpled napkins, forgotten pencils, and the occasional textbook that would need to be returned to its owner. The building had settled into the quieter rhythm of afternoon instruction, when the educational process moved at a steadier pace, and interruptions were less frequent. She was adjusting the cleaning supplies on her cart when the first sound reached her ears. A sharp crack that seemed to come from the main entrance, followed by shouts that carried a different quality than the typical teenage voices she heard throughout each day. Maria paused, her hand stilling on the spray bottle she had been organizing. The sounds were wrong, carrying an urgency and fear that made her skin prickle with recognition. From her position near the cafeteria's service entrance, she could see part of the main hallway through the interior windows. What she observed made her breath catch in her throat. 3 figures in dark clothing and tactical gear were moving through the entrance with purposeful coordination. They carried weapons with a familiarity that spoke of training and intent. Behind them, she could see Gary Morrison, the security guard, lying motionless on the floor near his desk. Maria's mind processed the scene with the clarity that came from years of military training that no one at Riverside High knew she possessed. Before becoming a janitor, before the quiet years of invisibility and routine maintenance, she had served 8 years in the Army, including 2 deployments where she had learned to assess threats and respond to danger with deadly efficiency. Those skills had been dormant for nearly 2 decades, buried beneath the peaceful routine of school custodial work. But they surged back to life as she watched the armed figures advance into her building. The lockdown alarm began its piercing wail, the sound that every student and staff member had practiced responding to but hoped never to hear in a real emergency. Classroom doors slammed shut throughout the building as teachers implemented the protocols they had rehearsed monthly. The hallways that moments before had echoed with the sounds of learning suddenly fell into an eerie silence broken only by the mechanical shriek of the warning system. Maria moved away from the windows, her mind automatically shifting into tactical assessment mode. 3 suspects, armed with what appeared to be semi-automatic rifles. They had disabled the main security checkpoint, which meant they had planned this attack carefully. The building's lockdown procedures would protect many students and staff members. But the protocols also meant that potential victims were now trapped in their locations, unable to move to safer areas. The school's layout flashed through her memory with the precision of someone who had walked every corridor thousands of times. She knew which classrooms had reinforced doors, and which had flimsy locks that would provide minimal protection. She understood the building's sightlines, the locations where an attacker could position themselves to control multiple escape routes. Most importantly, she knew passages and service areas that the intruders would not expect. From the main hallway, she could hear voices shouting commands. The attackers were moving with coordination, one remaining near the entrance while the other 2 advanced toward different wings of the building. Their voices carried the cold efficiency of people executing a predetermined plan. They were not acting from sudden impulse or emotional breakdown, but following a strategy they had developed in advance. Maria reached for the radio clipped to her belt, the communication device that connected her to the maintenance supervisor and main office. She keyed the microphone and spoke in a low, steady voice that betrayed none of the adrenaline coursing through her system. "This is Maria Santos. I have visual confirmation of 3 armed suspects in the main hallway. Security guard is down. Suspects are proceeding toward the academic wings." The response came immediately from Mrs. Palmer in the main office, her voice tight with controlled panic. "Maria, get to a secure location immediately. Police have been notified and are en route. Do not attempt to engage." Maria acknowledged the transmission but did not move towards safety. Instead, she opened the supply closet that served as her unofficial command center and retrieved items that most people would not recognize as tactical equipment. The heavy-duty flashlight could serve as both illumination and impact weapon. The industrial zip ties in her supply kit could restrain a person effectively. The maintenance master keys would give her access to areas the attackers could not reach. More importantly, she removed a small lockbox from behind the cleaning supplies, a container that held items from her military service that she had kept for reasons she had never fully examined. Inside was a tactical knife, still sharp after years of storage, and a compact first aid kit designed for battlefield injuries. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency as she secured these items, muscle memory from another life taking control. The sound of gunfire erupted from the direction of the science wing, followed by screaming that made Maria's jaw clench with determination. The attackers were no longer just moving through the building. They were actively engaging with their targets. Every second of delay meant more potential victims, more families that would be destroyed by violence that could possibly be prevented. She moved toward the service corridor that ran parallel to the main hallway, a narrow passage used by maintenance staff that would allow her to track the suspect's movements without being detected. The lockdown procedures had activated automatically controlled doors and emergency lighting, but Maria's master keys overrode these systems, giving her freedom of movement that no one else in the building possessed. Through ventilation grates and service windows, she could observe the attackers' positions and movements. The one who had remained near the entrance was scanning the hallway with his weapon raised, clearly intended to prevent escape and block law enforcement entry. The other two had split up, one heading toward the administrative offices, while the third moved toward the classroom areas where the majority of students and teachers were locked down. Maria's military training provided tactical analysis that civilian employees could not have made. The attackers were maintaining communication through earpieces, suggesting a level of coordination that indicated extensive planning. Their movement patterns showed familiarity with the building layout, which meant they had conducted reconnaissance before the attack. Most critically, their positioning suggested they intended to control the building long enough to cause maximum casualties before law enforcement could respond effectively. The service corridor brought her to a position where she could observe the suspect moving toward the classroom wing. Through the maintenance access panel, she could see him checking door handles, looking for classrooms that had not been properly secured. Most teachers had followed lockdown protocols correctly, but a few doors showed the gaps in security that came from systems that were designed for routine emergencies rather than determined attackers. Room 237, where Mrs. Patterson taught chemistry, had a door that had never properly aligned with its frame. The lock engaged, but a determined push could force it open. Maria watched with growing urgency as the attacker noticed the same weakness she had observed during her daily maintenance rounds. He approached the door with the systematic patience of someone following a plan. Inside that classroom, Maria knew, were 26 students and a teacher who had dedicated her career to education rather than combat. Mrs. Patterson was a gentle woman in her 40s who had never imagined that her chemistry knowledge might need to be supplemented with survival skills. The students were sophomores and juniors, most of them 16 and 17 years old, whose biggest concerns that morning had been upcoming tests and weekend plans. The attacker positioned himself outside the classroom door and raised his weapon. Maria realized that in seconds he would force entry and begin shooting people who had no means of defense. The law enforcement response, no matter how rapid, would not arrive in time to prevent the slaughter that was about to occur in room 237. Maria made her decision with the cold calculation that had kept her alive during 2 combat deployments. She opened the maintenance access panel silently, using skills that had been honed in environments where a single mistake meant death. The service corridor brought her to within 15 feet of the attacker, close enough to act but requiring her to cross open ground where she would be visible and vulnerable. The tactical knife felt familiar in her hand as she emerged from concealment. 20 years of peaceful custodial work had not erased the muscle memory of close combat or the ability to move with lethal silence. The attacker was focused on the classroom door, confident in his tactical superiority and unaware that he was being stalked by someone with training that exceeded his own. Maria closed the distance in 3 swift steps, her approach masked by the continuous wail of the lockdown alarm. The knife found its target with precision, severing the attacker's spine at the base of his skull in a technique that killed instantly and silently. He collapsed without firing a shot, his weapon clattering to the floor as his body went limp. She caught the falling rifle before it could make noise and quickly dragged the body into an alcove where it would not be immediately visible. The entire engagement had taken less than 10 seconds and had occurred without alerting the other attackers to her presence. Room 237 remained secure, its occupants unaware of how close they had come to disaster. Maria checked the attacker's equipment with professional thoroughness. Extra ammunition, communication device, and what appeared to be a detailed floor plan of the school, marked with target locations. The level of preparation confirmed her assessment that this was a carefully planned assault rather than a spontaneous act of violence. Through the earpiece she had taken from the dead attacker, she could hear communications between the remaining 2 suspects. They were coordinating their movements and had noticed that their third member was not responding to radio calls. Their voices carried the tension of people whose plan was not proceeding as expected. "Alpha, report status," came a voice through the small speaker. "You should have reached the classroom targets by now." When no response came, the voice became more urgent. "Alpha, respond immediately. Beta, move to Alpha's last known position and assess situation." Maria realized she had perhaps 2 minutes before one of the remaining attackers would come looking for their missing partner. She could use that time to reach another position where she might eliminate the second threat. Or she could use it to provide intelligence to the law enforcement response that was presumably mobilizing outside the building. She keyed her maintenance radio and spoke in the calm, measured tone that had characterized her communications during military operations. "This is Maria Santos. I have neutralized 1 suspect near room 237. 2 suspects remain active. 1 in administrative area, 1 controlling main entrance. Suspect carried detailed building plans and professional communication equipment. Recommend tactical response." The voice that responded was not Mrs. Palmer, but someone she did not recognize, presumably a law enforcement official who had taken control of the emergency communications. "Maria, this is Deputy Chief Harrison with Metro Police. Confirm you said neutralized? Confirmed. Threat eliminated. I am mobile and tracking remaining suspects. Maria, we need you to move to a secure location and wait for our tactical team to arrive. Do not engage further." Maria understood the deputy chief's position, but she also understood that tactical teams would require time to assess the situation, plan their approach, and execute their response. During that time, 2 armed suspects would continue to threaten hundreds of innocent people who had no means of protecting themselves. "Negative on withdrawing to secure location," she responded. "I have tactical advantage and detailed knowledge of building layout. Remaining suspects are not aware of my presence. Will continue to monitor and engage as necessary." Before the deputy chief could respond, Maria switched off her radio and moved toward the administrative wing where one of the remaining attackers was operating. The service corridors provided concealed movement routes that would allow her to assess the situation without exposing herself to gunfire. The administrative area presented different tactical challenges than the classroom wing. The offices had multiple entry points and sightlines that could work either for or against someone attempting to neutralize an armed threat. The suspect's positioning would determine her approach and the techniques she would need to employ. Through the maintenance access points, she could observe the second attacker systematically searching the administrative offices. He was looking for specific targets, possibly administrators or staff members whose names appeared on the building plans he carried. His methodical approach suggested he was following a predetermined list of high-value targets. Principal Dr. Williams was locked in his office, following the same protocols he had trained his staff to implement. The office's reinforced door and interior positioning provided better protection than most classrooms, but Maria knew that a determined attacker with the right tools could eventually force entry. The suspect was carrying what appeared to be explosive devices that could breach even reinforced barriers. Assistant Principal Mr. Davidson had been caught in the main office area when the attack began, and his location was more vulnerable. The open floor plan and multiple access points meant that the lockdown procedures provided limited protection against someone moving systematically through the space. Maria positioned herself where she could observe both the suspect's current location and his likely next moves. The administrative area's layout required a different approach than the narrow hallway where she had eliminated the first attacker. She would need to create an opportunity that would allow her to engage without giving the suspect time to fire his weapon or alert his remaining partner. The sound of forced entry came from the direction of the principal's office, as the suspect began using tools to breach the reinforced door. Dr. Williams's voice could be heard through the intercom system as he tried to maintain communication with law enforcement while barricaded in his office. His calm professionalism under pressure impressed Maria, though she knew his courage would not protect him from an armed attacker with explosives. Maria moved through the service corridor to a position that would allow her to enter the administrative area behind the suspect's position. The maintenance access brought her to the copy room adjacent to the main office, where she could observe the suspect's activities while planning her approach. The attacker was focused on his breaching operation, using what appeared to be a small explosive charge to weaken the principal's door. His concentration on this task created the tactical opportunity Maria needed, but the confined space and multiple potential civilian casualties required precise execution. She emerged from the copy room with a tactical knife in one hand and the dead attacker's rifle in the other. The combination of close combat and ranged weapons gave her options for engaging regardless of how the situation developed. Her approach was silent, using techniques that had been refined during urban combat operations where civilian casualties were unacceptable. The suspect heard her movement at the last moment and began to turn, but Maria's training had prepared her for exactly this scenario. The knife found its target before he could bring his weapon to bear, and he collapsed silently beside the door he had been trying to breach. The second threat had been eliminated without gunfire or explosive detonation. Principal Dr. Williams emerged from his office moments later, his face showing the strain of the past few minutes but his composure intact. He stared at Maria with an expression of complete bewilderment, trying to reconcile the quiet janitor he had known for 17 years with the woman who had just saved his life with military efficiency. "Maria," he said, his voice carrying amazement rather than fear. "How did you—" "One suspect remains at main entrance," she replied, already moving toward the hallway. "Stay in your office until law enforcement secures the building." She could hear sirens approaching outside, indicating that the police response was finally arriving. But the remaining attacker still controlled the main entrance, which meant he could potentially engage law enforcement officers as they attempted to enter the building. His position also allowed him to threaten any students or staff members who might attempt to evacuate. Maria moved toward the main hallway, using the service corridors to approach the entrance area without being detected. The final confrontation would be the most challenging because the suspect was in a defensive position and would have clear sight lines down the main hallway. She would need to use every advantage the building's layout could provide. Through the ventilation system, she could hear the suspect communicating with someone outside the building, presumably a coordinator who was monitoring law enforcement response. His voice carried increasing tension as he realized his partners were no longer responding to radio calls and that his situation was deteriorating rapidly. "Both Alpha and Beta are down," he was saying into his communication device. "Repeat, Alpha and Beta are not responding. I am maintaining position at primary entrance, but may need immediate extraction." The response was inaudible to Maria, but the suspect's body language showed growing agitation. He was no longer following a predetermined plan, but adapting to circumstances that had not been anticipated. This tactical uncertainty made him more dangerous in some ways, but also more vulnerable to being outmaneuvered. Maria reached a position where she could observe the main entrance while remaining concealed. The suspect had positioned himself behind the security desk, using Gary Morrison's fallen body as cover while maintaining fields of fire down multiple hallways. His tactical positioning was sound, but it also limited his mobility and awareness of threats from other directions. The maintenance area provided access to the electrical systems that controlled lighting and security features throughout the building. Maria realized she could create tactical advantages by manipulating these systems, using her intimate knowledge of the building's infrastructure to level the playing field against an opponent with superior firepower. She accessed the electrical panel and systematically shut down the lighting in the main entrance area while leaving the hallway lights active. This created a contrast that would temporarily blind someone looking from the darkened entrance toward the illuminated hallways, giving her precious seconds to close the distance before the suspect could adjust to the changed conditions. The sound of police vehicles in the parking lot indicated that the tactical response was preparing to make entry. Maria knew that standard protocols would require time for assessment and planning, during which the remaining suspect could potentially cause significant casualties. Her position inside the building and knowledge of the suspect's exact location gave her advantages that the external response team could not possess. She moved through the service corridor to a position that would allow her to approach the main entrance from an unexpected angle. The suspect's attention was focused on the main doors where he expected law enforcement to appear, leaving him vulnerable to approach from the maintenance areas he did not know existed. Maria emerged from concealment with the rifle ready, her military training taking complete control as she prepared for the final engagement. The suspect sensed movement and began to turn, but 17 years of invisibility had taught Maria patience, and 2 decades of military experience had taught her lethality. The confrontation was over before the suspect could bring his weapon to bear. The building fell silent except for the continuing wail of the lockdown alarm and the approaching sounds of law enforcement entry. Maria stood among the aftermath of violence she had prevented, surrounded by the evidence of skills that no one had suspected she possessed. In the space of 15 minutes, she had transformed from overlooked custodial worker to the person who had saved hundreds of lives through decisive action and expert application of deadly force. The SWAT team found Maria Santos standing calmly beside her cleaning cart in the main hallway, her hands visible and empty as tactical officers swept through the building. She had secured the weapons and was waiting exactly where Deputy Chief Harrison had instructed responding units to expect her. The silence that greeted them was not the eerie quiet of ongoing danger, but the profound stillness that followed decisive action. Officer Lieutenant Torres approached her with the cautious respect reserved for someone whose capabilities had just been demonstrated in the most serious circumstances possible. His team had expected to find an active shooter situation requiring careful tactical response. Instead, they discovered 3 neutralized threats and a school custodian who spoke in the measured tones of someone comfortable with post-combat procedures. "Ma'am, I'm Lieutenant Torres. Are you injured?" His question carried professional concern mixed with obvious bewilderment at the scene before him. "Negative. No injuries. Building is secure. 3 threats eliminated." Maria's response was clipped and precise, the communication style that had served her during military operations where clarity could mean survival. Dr. Williams emerged from the administrative wing, his face still processing what he had witnessed. Behind him came teachers and students, as the all-clear was given room by room. Their expressions showed the mixture of relief and confusion that comes with surviving something they never imagined they would face. "She saved us," Dr. Williams told Lieutenant Torres, his voice carrying the weight of someone who understood exactly how close they had come to tragedy. Maria saved everyone in this building. The debriefing took place in the library, where Maria sat across from FBI Special Agent Rebecca Hayes and answered questions with the same quiet competence she had brought to 17 years of custodial work. The federal investigators had been called in due to the sophisticated nature of the attack and the discovery that the perpetrators had been planning similar assaults on other schools. "You served 8 years in the Army," Agent Hayes stated, reading from a file that had been hastily assembled. 2 deployments. Decorated for valor. Specialized in urban combat operations. Why didn't anyone at the school know about your military background? Maria considered the question with the same thoughtfulness she had always brought to her work. "People see what they expect to see. I was here to clean floors and maintain the building. My past wasn't relevant to that job." The investigation revealed details that transformed the narrative from a simple case of workplace heroism to something more complex. The attackers had been part of a coordinated network that had been planning simultaneous assaults on multiple educational facilities. Their intelligence gathering had been extensive, including detailed floor plans and staff schedules that suggested inside assistance. Within hours, news crews had arrived outside Riverside High School. The story of the unassuming janitor who had single-handedly prevented a massacre captured national attention in ways that surprised everyone involved. Maria found herself thrust into a spotlight she had spent 2 decades avoiding. Sarah Chen, the student body president, organized a gathering in the gymnasium 3 days after the incident. Students, teachers, and parents filled the space that had once hosted basketball games and assemblies, now serving as a venue for recognition that was long overdue. "For 17 years, Maria Santos has taken care of our school," Sarah said, her voice carrying across the packed gymnasium. "We thought we knew what that meant. We were wrong." The applause that followed was different from the polite recognition typically given to support staff. It carried the weight of genuine respect and gratitude from people whose lives had been preserved by someone they had barely noticed. Principal Dr. Williams stepped forward with documents that represented a formal acknowledgement of what had occurred. The school board has voted unanimously to name Maria Santos as our Director of Security and Emergency Preparedness. Her unique qualifications make her the ideal person to ensure something like this never happens again. Maria accepted the position with the same quiet dignity she had brought to every other aspect of her work. The title change meant increased responsibilities and recognition, but more importantly, it meant her skills would be used to protect the community she had served in the shadows for so long. The investigation also revealed how her intimate knowledge of the building had been crucial to her success. The service corridors, electrical systems, and maintenance access points that she navigated daily had become tactical advantages that professional law enforcement would have needed hours to identify and utilize. Mrs. Patterson, the chemistry teacher whose classroom had been moments away from attack, approached Maria during the ceremony. "I don't know how to thank someone for saving my life and the lives of my students," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You don't need to thank me," Maria replied. "You just need to keep teaching them. That's what matters." The media attention eventually faded, but the changes at Riverside High School were permanent. Security protocols were updated based on Maria's recommendations, incorporating lessons learned from someone who understood both the building's vulnerabilities and the realities of armed response. Students who had previously walked past Maria without acknowledgement now stopped to speak with her. Their conversations revealed genuine interest in her experiences and gratitude for her presence. The invisible barrier that had separated support staff from the academic community had been shattered by circumstances that proved everyone's contributions mattered. Marcus Williams, the basketball team captain, began organizing volunteer groups to help with building maintenance, understanding that caring for their school was everyone's responsibility. The work created connections between students and the physical space they occupied daily. Jennifer Walsh, the talented vocalist, dedicated her senior recital performance to Maria and the other support staff members who made education possible. Her gesture represented a broader shift in how the school community valued different kinds of service. The memorial service for Gary Morrison, the security guard who had been killed in the initial assault, drew hundreds of attendees. Maria spoke briefly, honoring a colleague whose dedication to protecting students had cost him his life. Her words carried the authority of someone who understood the risks that came with standing between innocence and violence. 3 months later, Maria Santos walked through the hallways of Riverside High School with the same measured pace she had maintained for nearly 2 decades. Her uniform now bore different insignia, and her responsibilities had expanded beyond maintenance to include comprehensive security planning. But her fundamental commitment to protecting and serving the school community remained unchanged. Students still gathered around lockers between classes, teachers still prepared lessons that would inspire and challenge young minds, and the daily rhythms of education continued as they had for generations. The difference was an awareness that safety required vigilance, and that heroes sometimes emerged from the most unexpected places. The service corridors that had once hidden Maria's movements now served as training grounds, where she taught selected staff members about emergency response procedures. Her expertise, once unknown and unrecognized, had become an integral part of the school's preparedness planning. Dr. Williams had framed a letter from the Secretary of Education recognizing Riverside High School as a model for emergency preparedness and community resilience. The document hung in his office as a reminder that strength often developed quietly, in the daily dedication of people who served without seeking recognition. Maria's story had become part of the school's identity, but she remained focused on the future rather than the past. Her experience had taught her that the most important security measure was a community that looked out for each other, where everyone understood their role in creating a safe environment for learning and growth. The morning announcements no longer sounded routine to anyone who had lived through that Tuesday when alarms meant more than practice. But they also carried new meaning about the people who dedicated their lives to education and the unexpected ways that ordinary service could become extraordinary heroism. In the end, Maria Santos had done exactly what she had always done. She had taken care of her school and the people in it. The only difference was that now everyone understood what that really meant. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.